This is my ADVintage Fedora's junior model in a Raiders of the Lost Ark bash. Many people who have found this channel found it through this hat. And this hat has seen almost 10 years of adventure. It's one of my favorite pieces and most prized possessions because A, it was my first real Indiana Jones hat. B, it was my first real fur felt fedora. And C, most importantly, it was a birthday gift from my dad. And that kind of sentimental value you can't replace with a lot of things. And in the years since I've gotten this hat, which I got this in 2014 or 2015, I think, I've acquired a lot more indie hats, which I've talked about at length on this channel. Whether it's my Fedorators, or my Akubra Federation 4 Deluxe, or as recently as my Broken Skull Hat Co. Young Indie. I have owned a lot of indie hats. And many questions that I receive is, where did you get it? Where did you get that hat? Where do you get your hats? And that's a very fair question because the majority of the people who ask them are trying to get into this Indiana Jones cosplay hobby. And while I get that question a lot, I usually tend to give the same response, which is, what's your budget? Because there are a lot of makers out there, and they all range wildly in pricing. So if you're really trying to get into this economically, where you're not spending $400, even though if you spent $400 on something like a Fedorators, you're getting an incredible piece of work. Some people just can't afford that. They need to start somewhere. And ADVintage, to me, has always been the greatest starter hat. And I've wanted to talk about this for some time, but I haven't been able to until now. See, ADVintage doesn't sell the Junior anymore. And I don't know when this went out of production, but they don't sell it anymore. They sell this, the Harrison. This is their new factory economy hat. And boy howdy do I have some things to say about it. And that's what this video is going to be. We are going to compare and contrast, find the pros and cons of the new and the old of ADVintage. So, in talking about these hats, it means that I'm not going to be able to wear this one. And as you can see, I have some awful hat hair. So, I'm going to cover that up by wearing my very beautiful Broken Skull Hat Co. Young Indie, which I made a video about, which I'm going to link either up in that weird informational bar up top or in the description down below. Either way, please check it out because my buddy Kirk did an amazing job on this beautiful replica. Anyway, with that, let's get this out of the way. What are the immediate comparisons that we can make? Well, firstly, there's the felt color. The Junior has this overall semi-sable, more of a deeper brown kind of color to it, and that was the only color you could get. And it works fine, it looks good, but over time, as you can see in spots like here and here, the felt wears off. And yeah, that can happen with any hat, but I seem to have seen a very common trait with the Junior. I don't know like how this hat was pounced, but I've seen a lot of Juniors over the years with the same problem. There are places where the felt has rubbed off because that's where people were grabbing it to either take the hat off or put it on, and it's no different here. The ribbon was, in my opinion, just a little too thick. Comparing it with my Fedorators, you can see that it's a little too big and it's not thin and squared off, especially in the ribbon. And that's another thing. So I've got my Fedorators here, and we're going to compare that for a second, because this is something that even irks me a little bit about the Harrison, and that's the brim. The brim just tends to be a little too flat and doesn't flange. Even if you put the turn in there, it doesn't flange correctly. So I'm actually going to put the ADVintage on first, showing that this is a 58. I'm a 59, and this doesn't fit. This kind of wiggling and just overall not fitting is not good. And luckily this is something that you don't see in the Harrison, because this is a 58. It's not a 59, it's not a 60, this is a 58, and this much loose give is not good. I had to fold the sweatband and stuff the sweatband for it to have any kind of snug fit, as to where the Fedorators is a 59, and this thing fits like a dream. It's one of the most comfortable hats I have ever owned. Seriously, I have owned many fedoras, but none of them fit like the Fedorators do. And it just flanges beautifully, as you can see. The brim flanges exactly like a Raider's brim is supposed to flange, and you don't get that with the Junior, and you don't get that with the Harrison, but it's a factory hat. You cannot expect to have the same kind of attention to detail in a factory economy hat like this. Moving from the exterior of the hats, which in all honesty, both these hats do a very good job mimicking what they're supposed to. This was a great start when Tomas was first building his company, but now he's gotten to this point where the economy hats are just as good as the more high-end hats. I see a lot of people going for Harrisons, and I'm fooled by thinking that they're the more expensive hats. And the felt, that's one more thing I need to talk about before we go on to the inside. The felt is much different. With the Juniors, you got a 100% rabbit felt hat. With the Harrisons, it's a beautiful mixed felt. So you have 50% rabbit, 50% beaver, which in that case, this is a much stronger, much more durable hat, as to where this rabbit felt is amazing. I will always love rabbit felt, but it cannot take the same type of beating that a beaver hat or even a rabbit beaver mix can. So that's that on the exteriors. Now let's move to the interior. I will apologize and say that the interior of this is crusty and old, because I've been wearing it for 7 years before I started getting different hats. Also, I realize that my ugly hat head is still visible to you all, so I'm just going to put on the pretty Fedorators. Anyway, so the interiors. First we have the ADVintage Fedora's interior. This was your basic white liner, much like what you have here. And then you have this, I believe this was sheepskin hat liner. Very soft. I still really like this sweatband. And I thought for an economy hat, it was very impressive. It's still very impressive for an economy hat. I've always liked the little shield on the inside. I kind of miss the old ADVintage Fedora shield. I have a picture somewhere of this interior brand new, and I think I might throw that up on screen so you don't have to see this very ugly, sweat-stained, falling out liner. That's another thing that I will say that has not changed about the liners, is that both these liners, this one has fallen out over time and is just being held in by the sweatband, but both these liners are glued in. And that is a very common thing with a lot of hat makers, is that they will glue in the liner instead of sewing it in with the hat band, and a lot of hat companies do that. Herbert Johnson did it for the indie films when they made the hats. It's a common thing. It's actually much more rare to find a hat company who sews in the liner and doesn't glue it in. So that's something that has actually remained from the Junior into the Harrison. The liner on the Harrison, in my opinion, is a much nicer liner. The silk is soft, very nice. But the sweatband, I feel, is where they have really stepped up their game. This is soft, but this is silky smooth and just feels much better when wearing it over a much longer period of time. And then the touch of just the ADVintage logo on the side there, that's a type of classy that everyone can agree upon. It really makes your hat stand out, especially when somebody is storing their hat like that, which is the proper way to put your hat when you're not wearing it, so you don't mess up the brim. But when you have your hat sitting like that, somebody can see the logo, be like, ooh, ADVintage. That's a nice hat. I'd like to see what else they have in their library. Then you have your standard 100% fur felt, which I see in a lot of modern hats. As to where with the old Junior, it was just your blank standard hat sweatband. That's another big thing. This is an ADVintage Fedoras. This is ADVintage Hats. I don't know when the name change happened, but I gotta admit, I kind of miss ADVintage Fedoras. But I understand why Tomas changed it to ADVintage Hats, because it's not just the Indy Fedora that he offers anymore. He makes a wide variety of hats, and they're all fantastic. So, overall, I would say that while a lot of things have carried over, like an unflanged brim and a really classy white interior liner, there are many things that Tomas has stepped up in the economy line game, like a little bit more accurate pinches, a much more accurate color, and just, I don't know, far better specs in my opinion. These Harrison hats just tend to be more spec friendly to me than the old Junior was, and so far from what I've seen a lot of people who own Harrisons for like 2+ years, and so far the problems with the Junior of the felt wearing off wherever you're grabbing it isn't happening with these, so that makes me happy. Because this was a kind of an unsightly thing and really took away from what is a nice starter hat. So that's all I can think of right now. If I need to make an addendum to this, I will, but in my opinion, ADVintage still makes the best starter hats. And if you can find them secondhand, even better. But that's all I've got for today, and I will see you all in the next video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.